Welcome to my study today. I'm going to look at the four adverbs rather, pretty, quite and fairly, and I'll show you how to get them into your spoken English so you sound more like a native speaker. I'll also show you how the English use them in understatement, which you might not know about. And at the end, there's an exercise for you to practice. So, let's get started. How do we decide which is the strongest word to use? Let's have a look at this scale. It goes from very good, rather and pretty good, which we say when we're speaking, quite good, fairly good and no good at all. Well, suppose you go to a restaurant and you have a steak, and the waiter comes along after you've had your meal and he says, "How was the steak?" Well, there can be a lot of answers to that, and let's take the strongest first. This man says, "It was rather good, superb flavour." And he's thinking, pretty good, because remember, when we speak we can say pretty good. Pretty good, thanks. I'll come here again. This lady says, quite good, needed more sauce. Not bad for the money, but nothing special. So she's qualifying good to her own opinion. And this young man, fairly good, but a bit chewy. Yeah, I've had steaks like that, have you? I've had better, he's thinking. But in all these cases, these adverbs are used as adverbs of degree. Now let's look at that a bit more closely. These adverbs can have more than one meaning depending on your point of view. So let's take moderately first. This lady said, quite good, needed more sauce. But if you think about it, what does good mean? It might mean something differently to her than it does to me. Here's another example. These shoes are in a sale. Yeah, they're quite cheap. No, fairly cheap. But it depends how rich you are, doesn't it? If you've got a lot of money, you might think it's nothing. So yeah, well, they're quite cheap. I'd buy them. Again, you're expressing a point of view. And you do that with these words, which we call sliding scale words. Things like cold, dark, because it could be very cold to you, not very cold, quite dark. It just depends how you feel. So if you feel a bit more strongly, well, you can introduce the word rather. It's rather cold here.
Brr.
But wait a minute, there's a different opinion. Well, it's quite cold, but wait until winter. So a point of view is being expressed. It might surprise you to learn that quite can actually mean completely. Harry is quite exhausted after working all night. And here's another example. Keeping an elephant as a pet in an apartment is quite absurd. Quite can mean completely when we use it with extreme words like these. Alike, delicious, different. Something is either delicious or it isn't. Look at this example. The cat is quite dead. Oh, poor old cat. I'm quite certain. You can't use fairly or rather because it can't be fairly dead or rather dead. So we use the extreme quite dead, I'm certain. If you don't want to use quite as a complete meaning, then you can come back a little bit and say considerably, 95%, and still use the extreme words. Petra and Pooh look rather alike. Yes, they are. They're brother and sister. So you can introduce a shade of meaning with rather. Quite and rather can be followed by a noun and a verb.
Phew.
Phew, that was quite a hot day. And you notice we have the indefinite article, and we use that for emphasis. Quite a hot day. That mosquito is rather a nuisance.
Good idea.
That's rather a good idea. We can actually change the word order here, so don't be surprised if you see this. That's a rather good idea. I'll try it next time. It's just a slight difference. The first one is you've heard perhaps for the first time this new idea. Oh, that's rather a good idea. But in the second one, you're thinking about the statement. That's rather a good idea. Yeah, I'll try that next time I do something. Now let's follow these two words with a verb. I quite like pistachio ice cream.
Relax.
I rather enjoy doing nothing. And I'll show you how to use these structures in a moment to get more marks in your oral exams. But here's a warning. This can be slightly confusing. I'm thirsty. I would rather like a cup of tea. Means if you say that, you want a cup of tea now. You're just thirsty and you'd like a drink. But if someone says, tea or coffee? I'd rather have a cup of coffee, please, means you're choosing one instead of the other. You're making a choice. That is a little confusing, so be careful with that structure. Rather can be used with comparatives and the word to, like this. My brother is rather older than me. This bus is crowded and there are rather too many people on it. We cannot do this with quite and fairly. How can we use these words to get you some more marks in your oral exams? The examiner will quite often ask you, do you like something? Do you like playing football, for example? Most students will answer, yes, I like. But that's not very English. This would be better. Yes, I quite like. Or yes, I rather like. Do you like playing football? Yes, I quite like playing football, but I prefer playing tennis. And it's a similar thing if you're asked for your agreement. Do you agree with your partner? You could answer like this. I quite agree with you, if you are 100% in agreement. Or I quite understand. And you can follow that with a but and then give your own opinion. Or, to be polite, I don't quite agree with you. You can apply this to these other verbs, enjoy and appreciate, and use those words as adverbs of degree. What do I mean using fairly and rather as the English use them? Well, we love understatement, like this. I've got some fairly good news for you. Oh yes, I've just won the lottery. And that's positive, isn't it? Here's something negative though. I've got some rather bad news. My car caught fire. Bad and negative. But in both cases, we've substituted these words for the words very because we're using understatement. The English love to do that. Let me introduce you to Sally. What can we say about Sally? Well, it's her birthday today. She's 10. Let's say something positive. Sally is fairly tall for her age. It's a pleasant fact. Or we could say something negative. Sally is rather tall for her age. This suggests that she's too tall and we can't find clothes or shoes for her. Here's another warning. We can't use fairly with a colour. We can't say the sunset is fairly red. Either it's red, rather red, very red, quite red, but you can't use fairly. So let's summarise these two words. Fairly is positive and expresses a pleasing idea, and rather can express a negative or unpleasant idea. That's not always the case because it's rather a point of view rather than a grammar rule. So let me ask you these two questions which you can answer below. Did you think this lesson was rather easy or fairly difficult? Second question. Did you think this lesson was fairly easy or rather difficult? Put the answers below. I'll be interested to see what you think. And if you found this lesson useful for your grammar, could I ask you to subscribe below and ring that bell. Now let's have a look at some exercises. Exercise 1. Use rather or fairly to fill the blank spaces. Exercise 2. use quite or rather to fill the blank spaces. And here are the answers. Next time, we'll have a look at replacing the verb to become with go, get, and grow. So, thanks for watching. Please subscribe below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!